LinkedIn rock star, and it confused a bunch of people. So um, hopefully, we'll,
Can you put the link in the
yes,
chat
I
for
just was
everybody?
going to do. I just realized I had not done that, so I'm going to do that right this second.
Yeah, because I want to be able to see what people are saying.
Right.
Let me uh, let's see. I can let's see if I can find it. How about I just type it? Should have done this before.
So, in order to see the chat, we need to be in LinkedIn, right?
In order
Yes.
to respond to it, you can see it on the rest stream, but you can't comment on
Respond
it.
to it.
Here we go. Over here.
Okay.
I don't think we've got. I logged in a little bit earlier, so. Hey everyone, if you see us, welcome. We're just gonna doing a little housekeeping duties, and then we'll get started. So. On the side. So I just sent the link in our career coaches chat, and now I'm going to do the same in the other one. We'll do introductions. This is what happens when Ken goes away.
Don't go away. We're getting our act together.
That's
We are
right.
getting our act together. I apologize. I should have done this. I should have done this. I should have done this earlier, and I just totally forgot. There we go. Okay. We are live. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much. Sorry about that. Hey, Meryl. Thanks for watching or listening to our to us doing some housekeeping duties there. We wanted to make sure everybody had the link to the event, and of course, Ken is away this week, and when he's away, well, all hell can break loose sometimes. So, but I am joined by with Charlotte Taylor and Alan Kirshner, and tonight we are going to talk about, is your LinkedIn profile helping or hurting your job search? So just as Ken would do, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Charlotte, to start it off with an introduction, and if you can give a quick tip on LinkedIn or anything that you'd like to see. And I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about, because we had a pretty lively conversation this week in our group chat. And if you're interested in joining that group chat, please let us know. Meryl, you can always message Meryl Cass as well. He would be more than happy to add you there. That way you stay on top of the events. But we had a lively conversation about scams and what's happening on the LinkedIn platform. So that might be a good conversation to have as well as it relates to LinkedIn. So all that being said, Charlotte, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlotte Taylor. I'm a resume writer and a career coach based in Central Florida, about halfway between Tampa and Orlando. And my website is writtenbyapro.com. I would appreciate it if everybody would go there and stay on a page for a minute and a half, just because I transferred over from a new web host and need to train Google that where I am in my new spot. So unfortunately, that didn't go as smoothly as I thought it would. But anyway, I'm happy to be here today to talk about LinkedIn. And, we really need to think about, is our LinkedIn profile helping or hurting us? With over 950 million users and, plus on LinkedIn, standing out requires more than just having a profile. That demands a strategic approach that speaks directly to what recruiters and hiring managers are actually looking for. And that's the difference between a profile that opens doors or one that closes them. And it often comes down to a few critical elements that most job seekers overlook. And I'm sure we're going to go, through all of those things tonight. Um, I think one of the first things that you have to keep in mind is to understand the recruiter's perspective. They need to be able to see who you are, what you do, and the value that you bring right away. So having a clear value proposition in your headline will help that. Um, and your headline needs to go just beyond just your job title. It should communicate your um, unique value proposition, or what we call UVP. If you're in sales, you've probably heard it as a unique selling proposition. It's the same thing. You're actually marketing yourself and your abilities. So instead of just saying, marketing manager at ABC company, which is the default, and it's just boring. Try incorporating a value proposition statement, something like marketing manager driving 40% revenue growth through data-driven campaigns, because that's a story that's worth listening to. And use those relevant keywords, I would say, in your headline. I guess that's my first tip for today.
Perfect. Alan, please introduce yourself and give us your tip.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan Kirshner. I'm a career coach based in very hot New Jersey today, and I'm sure Meryl can relate to that as well, too. But I help people with job search strategies, interview prep, resumes, and LinkedIn profile optimization. And I was just talking to somebody, one of my clients today, with LinkedIn, and a lot of times what I see initially is people don't realize how much real estate and space you have on LinkedIn. We were talking today about the About section, for example, and he had 2 or 3 sentences in his About section. And then I was showing him an example of one where you could put, significantly more information in there, including core competencies, your skills, your, things that kind of show what your personality is like too. So I think people don't realize how much space that you have in a lot of the areas of LinkedIn profile, and it's important to use that. I think it shows technical competency if you have a robust LinkedIn profile, and it's also, the more you have keywords in there, you come up on searches that recruiters do easier, and you come up higher, just as though when you're doing a Google search that you want to come up on the first page. So I think it's important to have a lot of content and especially keywords on your profile.
Great, thank you. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Melanie Mitchell-Wexler. I am a career coach as well as a LinkedIn strategist, and I help career professionals with everything from their resumes to their LinkedIn profiles, as well as LinkedIn strategy, and along with interview preparation and job search. And one of the things that I definitely geek out on the LinkedIn piece, and I'm also a former recruiter, I should add that as well. And one of the things that I do particularly see, just kind of adding on to what Charlotte and Alan have already mentioned, is not fully understanding all of the aspects of how you can utilize certain sections. And I definitely want to tackle some of those sections today that I think are underutilized from a job seeker standpoint. But most importantly, understanding what is happening in your market and doing some research ahead of time, I think, is an underutilized tip, because you would be surprised. Kind of get in. I see a lot of people talk about how much they hate LinkedIn, or LinkedIn doesn't work. And I always say, well, it only works. And I used to say this to my recruiters too, when we would talk about the applicant tracking system and how we can use it to find candidates. And the big thing I always used to say, and they hated it when I said it then, and people hate it when I say it now, but it's only as good as what we put in. And so that starts with your profile. So it's only going to be, and if your profile, even if you're doing everything right on the other end and engaging with people, or trying but not getting traction, then we may have to go back to your LinkedIn profile and say, okay, what's missing? Why are people not taking that next step to engage with you? What could be causing that? Or what's happening from that? We'll never have all the answers, but I think it's good to kind of see what kind of engagement you're getting. But remember, your profile is turned on 24/7. So it has a lot of power, and oftentimes will be seen much more before anybody sees your resume. So let's just dive in and let's just kind of keep this a little bit of a round robin, Charlotte and Alan, since it's just the three of us. But one of the things you mentioned, Charlotte, was things that job seekers are missing. I'd love to, I don't know how long we can, all three of us, come up with all the things that we think are missing that job seekers could take advantage of. It's like a telephone, basically, questions. But would love to start with you, Charlotte, because you're the one who brought that up. I have a few ideas that I think people can tap into, but I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing that you feel like is a big miss for job seekers today with their LinkedIn profiles?
Yeah, you're so right, Melanie, that your profile works 24/7, and recruiters use LinkedIn search functions more than a teenage girl uses Instagram. They're filtering by candidates, by specific skills, by job titles and industry terms. So if your profile lacks those keywords that they're searching for, you'll never appear in their search results. So, that's about as useful as an inflatable dartboard. It's not working. So you don't want to leave your reader deflated. You want to make the connection between the employer's needs and the value that you bring. So study the job descriptions. I know everybody says that, but really analyze it. I have a special form that you can download for free on my website, writtenbyapro.com. It's called a fit gap analysis, and it helps you to determine how good a match you are to that particular job. Are you an exact match? Are you missing some skills? Is there a skills gap? Do you have any transferable skills that would fill that gap? Or do you have any education certifications that, even though you may not have worked in that field yet, that could fill that gap? So you don't want to leave your reader hanging. You want to make that connection between the employer's needs and the value that you bring. So getting those keywords out of the job description is a good first step. You don't want to regurgitate that content, because then you won't stand out. Really give it some thought. What is a story that I could tell about a time when I did this? If that's, you'll notice in the hierarchy of the job description, they usually put the most important things first. So use that as a springboard to share your accomplishment stories.
That's a great tip, Charlotte, and you're absolutely right. I will say this, job descriptions are not all written equally. So it is good to have, in my opinion, like 3 or 4 that, general ones that you are probably applying for are all going to have similar types of keywords and phrases. But this is also a good place where you can start mirroring the language of what's happening in your industry and for your position. And does that show up in your profile? And that's a good way to, because it's going to help hiring managers and recruiters recognize that. And they're also going to, I always say, like, when I used to get a resume as a recruiter, could I picture the person kind of doing the job based on what I saw on the resume? Could I see them doing that? Did it jump out at me from the resume? And the same goes for your LinkedIn profile. Alan, what is one thing that you feel job seekers are missing when it comes to their LinkedIn profiles?
I think there are a number of things, but one thing I would focus on, a lot of times people don't have recommendations, and I think that's really a missed opportunity because that gives you third-party validation. It's not just what you say about yourself, how you present yourself on your resume and LinkedIn profile, but it's what other people who know you, who've worked with you or you've worked for, say about you. So I think it's really, really valuable to get that. And I look at that a lot, when I'm looking at somebody's profile too, to find out if they have recommendations and what people say about them. So I think that's important. Also, I think just a couple of other things I would say, that having a banner on LinkedIn that's not that default gray thing, but having something that stands out for what you are and what your brand is. I think that's important to kind of tell the story and sell yourself. And also, I think it's important to, in your headline, sometimes people just default that to what their last job was. I think it's important to put in titles of positions that you're interested in going for, as well as some of the skills that you bring to the table too. So I think, kind of piggybacking on what Charlotte was saying too, the keywords are really important too. So not only is that important to your resume, but it's important to your LinkedIn profile as well. When recruiters are looking for people, they're doing searches based on keywords too. So that's an opportunity. You can sprinkle in keywords in multiple areas of your LinkedIn profile, and that helps you come up higher in the algorithm when they're searching by some of those keywords.
And that's such a good thing to remember too, folks, is that every word you put into your profile actually can help you come up in a search. And so you want to make sure that, I always say you need those keywords, but the keywords need to have meaning. I would also add to like headlines, a trend that I started seeing people do is like things like X Amazon, X Google. You actually don't, in my opinion, you don't need that, because I can actually, if I wanted people, I can filter based on, let's see if I can say this right. I can filter based on people that, places that you previously worked. So I actually don't need that in your headline. That's a good, if you're doing that, that's also a potential place where you could actually use another keyword, whether it's a certification, whether it's a specific skill or a software that you have, anything along those lines that can help you. And I agree with you, Alan. I personally always do like to have it start with some type of position that you're seeking and then some type of statement with keywords at the end of it for the headline. Please do your banner. We still see so many of what I call those gray boxes of death, as my LinkedIn partner, Shel Shapiro, hears me say all too often. Because just like we land on a commercial or an advertisement or whatever, it makes us want, do we want to stay or do we want to go? And it should have something to do with what direction you're looking at. I think that's also something really important. Sometimes I see random pictures. And so, and you don't have to be a graphic artist either. Like I had a client recently, I just did his LinkedIn profile. He is in cybersecurity and software engineering. And truthfully, he had a stellar LinkedIn banner. I didn't change it. I didn't add any taglines or anything because the image evoked what the industry he is in. That's all we needed to have happen in that case. So, and I see, Charlie, you put in the chat your download of the free career worksheet. So thank you so much for doing that. And let's just keep the conversation rolling. But if anybody has any questions, we've got several people watching and or listening in, and and so please feel free, if I can talk, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or in the comment section down there, and we'll be happy to make sure that we answer them as it relates to your LinkedIn profile. So back to you, Charlotte. We're just going to do round robin for a little bit, and then until we've we've exhausted the list, and then we can talk a little bit about those all those nasty scams that are happening out there in the world. I feel like we have to do our public service announcement.
I think quantifiable achievements are the key. Numbers to speak louder than generic descriptions. Recruiters look for evidence of impact, not how many years you've been in a certain industry. They want to see how did you make a difference? Did you generate revenue? Did you save costs? Did you, manage teams across, several states? Did you bring in projects on time, within budget? These concrete kind of metrics help them assess your potential value to their organization. If you are an HR business partner, let's say, you might say something like reduced employee turnover by 35% across 3 business units with 1,200 employees each. And then you say how you did it. through implementation of targeted retention programs, saving $2.4 million annually in recruitment and training costs. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. You have the results first, then you have um, some metrics tied around it to give size and scope. And then if you have room, you can tell how you did it. Sometimes I will leave off the how you did it in a resume because you want to kind of guide the interviewer's questions. Wow, how did you reduce employee turnover by 35%? I want to know more about that. So you have to, use your discretion to say if you want to, to give the how, but you do want to give the results and and tie some metrics around it. I'll give you another example, maybe. National sales manager, enterprise technology. I was working with a client, and we wrote something like, led a 15-person sales team to exceed quota by 142% and generating 18 million in new enterprise contracts while expanding the average deal size from 250,000 to 380,000. So that gave you some clear metrics. Nobody would have to, ask him if he was an effective sales leader because his accomplishments spoke for themselves. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, and thank you so much for that. And the one thing I would add, really quickly is I think sometimes too, people are giving way too much information on their LinkedIn profiles. The examples that Charlotte gave are like one or two examples are perfect because in a way it's kind of like you want them to reach out to you and whoever is reviewing it, you want to have them reach out to you and connect with you. So sometimes I say them, hiring managers, recruiters, decision makers, we might be giving them too much information by giving basically just copying and pasting everything that's on the resume. Leave them wanting more. Give them a reason to reach out to you. Give them a reason to connect with you and ask more questions. But based on what they see, they would like to have a conversation with you. And I would do something controversial. I'll say something maybe controversial. So as a recruiter, I loved it when people put their resumes on because I could just review it immediately. But I don't recommend it for my clients today because I want that recruiter and hiring manager to reach out to you. Because sometimes a recruiter will answer their own questions without digging a little bit deeper. And so again, leave them wanting more. But I'm going to ask you, Alan, a slightly different question because sometimes, and I know all of us get this question, is we find that person that says, well, I didn't do anything. I don't have any of those achievements. I don't have any metrics. That wasn't my job. And, I don't know any of that information. What do you advise somebody that is maybe in that situation or saying to themselves right now, and how do we think outside of the box to help that person?
I would say one of the things that I recommend would be to look at your past performance appraisals to see what was in there. You were given goals and things to accomplish, so that's a good starting point. Some jobs are more suitable where you have quantifiable accomplishments, like Charlotte was mentioning with sales or with when you work with financial information or things of that nature. Some things it's a little bit harder to quantify, but you can also, and one of the things people that I work with run into sometimes is that they don't have that information readily available from previous jobs or things that they did a while ago. So it's okay to do like your best guesstimate of what it is. It's, I'm not saying to say something that wasn't accurate, but you can give an idea of what it is, and that's not going to get validated by somebody else. So I think that's a way of going back where you don't have all the exact, facts and figures, so to speak, on older jobs too. But really, to think about what were your responsibilities, what were goals that were set. I mean, in most organizations, there's usually goal setting. Might not always be the case with smaller organizations too, but I think it takes a bit of brainstorming. This is something where career coaches can help you as well too. Sometimes you just don't think about everything. I do that with my clients too when it comes to thinking about what you want to be doing with your next role, and thinking about what are the things that you like to do on your job, what are the things that you didn't like. And sometimes you need some help from somebody else who's impartial, a work colleague or somebody that you worked for that can think about some of those things that maybe you just kind of take for granted and think it's a basic thing, but it's something that's important. So I think it takes a bit of thought, and it can be helpful when you work with either a coach or ask and solicit information requests to other people that know your work effort.
Perfect. And I actually did just have a client that he's been at 9 years at his job. He's a sales coordinator. And we were going through his resume, and he was like, well, my job is just to prepare the documents. That's what my job is. It's nothing, like I don't, like it's not my responsibility to close the deals or anything like that nature. And I started to dig a little bit deeper, and I said, well, what's the result of the actions that you take? So by you creating those sales documents, how does that help the sales team? How does, so by you preparing accurate, documents with the accurate information, making sure that you double check the numbers, you're helping drive sales. You may not be directly responsible for closing the sale, but you're helping drive those sales by the actions you take. So sometimes when we say, we talk a lot about quantifiable, but I would say, qualitative measurements are also valid as well, because that's also something that, you can kind of think of, like Alan mentioned, how can you think of that slightly different? And sometimes you do need that extra support person to get you to see something different, because we're too close to it and we're the ones doing it. So sometimes we don't see something that's right there in front of my face. So once we started to reframe, like I said to him, like go through each of your bullet points and ask yourself that question. By doing this action, what is the outcome of that? How is this supposed to help, impact, or improve the organization? So Matthew had a question, and it looks like he's doing some amazing stuff. Thanks, Charlotte, for responding to Matthew. But I want to go ahead and pose his question for the audience as well. But he wrote, in terms of his skills, he's listed them in the skills section. He's linked them to his prior employment and volunteering when possible. So right away, we know Matthew's automatically using a lot of the tools that we have available. He's rearranged his top skills to prioritize the most important ones. Are there any other recommendations or suggestions in regards to skills that will help improve the number of times he appears in searches? Charlotte or Ellen, who would like to? I have a couple of thoughts that I would probably add, but I'm going to let you guys go first. Whoever wants to jump right in.
Yeah, I can add something on that. I would say another section that you can add the skills in, and what I call core competencies too, is in the about section. So it sounds like you're putting them in a lot of areas, which is great because that really helps with the keyword searches. But you can certainly also put them in the about section. I think that would be helpful as well.
I would also add that, and that's also a great way too. You can add your top five skills to your about section. You just have to edit your about section, scroll all the way down, and it will allow you to add what I call those are your big skills. Those are the thing that you are like, that makes you unique and specifically to that. I would also add, and maybe this is where I think people now don't look at my LinkedIn profile, because a lot of times I use my profile to show my clients how to do things. So my skill sections are a little like out of control personally on LinkedIn. But I actually try to suggest not, again, kind of thinking in those top five, what were the top five skills you used at each of those positions, and go through all of your positions, not just even think about the skills that you're still using to this day that you were using 10 or 15, however many years ago. Even if it's not the job itself, what were those skills? You still are going to be showing up there. And then also you can have, we used to have 50, now we can have 100 skills. And I know that's a big number, but we do know that skills are playing a very important part on how you come up in searches and how you're potentially matched with jobs on LinkedIn specifically. And I'm more than happy to describe that if you guys want me to. Just let me know. So, Charlotte, what other areas do we feel like? I know there's one area that we haven't touched on that I definitely want to get to, but any other areas that you feel that job seekers are missing out when it's coming to their profile, or maybe they're doing it, but we just need to do it in a different way?
Yeah, we've talked about generic headlines. You don't want to look like vanilla pudding at a dessert buffet. You want to stand out, but you also don't want to be so creative with it that I can't tell what you do. It's nice, to have a little personal philosophy statement in the about section if that's what you want to do, if that speaks to your personality. But I don't think the headline is the right place for that because, the headline is where you need to feed the algorithm the data that it craves. So that would be one thing. And, I think people think it's more like I don't like it when people write in the third person point of view. It makes it sound like a career bio that's kind of stuffy, something that a company would post on their website, to show the shareholders what great leadership they have. This is your personal career story. You are the author of it. So you want to use personal pronouns, I and my, in your LinkedIn profile. It's a no-no as far as writing your resume. You don't want to use any personal pronouns in your resume. But this is a different situation. This is a different writing strategy. So you want to include, you want to write in a friendly tone of voice. You want to include your biggest wins, what drives you, what you're looking for next. So that it doesn't just sound like you're writing a job obituary. Each little experience section should tell a little story about what you really loved about that job, and leave out the parts that you didn't like so much unless they are, top qualifications that you have to have for that particular role. Because what you want to do is attract opportunities that fit you like a glove. And if you put things in there that you dislike, you're not going to like that next opportunity that comes along. So you're trying to be that magnet to draw in the right people and the right opportunities. And, I think most people kind of set it and forget it. And that's not going to work. LinkedIn is a living, breathing thing that you've got to interact with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So much value there. Alan, what are anything else that you think we haven't touched on? There's a couple of things that I want to bring up and get your guys' thoughts on, but anything else that comes to the top of mind?
One of the other areas I would say that I don't see as often people using is the featured section. And so
you're stealing my thought, Alan.
All right, I'll stop talking, Melanie.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, because that's an area where you can put audio or video, if you've done some video or you've been interviewed or, you've done talks or things like that. So that's an area where people can really get to know you a little bit better and more personal than just words on a page like a resume. So I think that's a feature, if you will, that people don't seem to know about as much or don't utilize as much as they could. And I think it can be really impactful and really give people a sense of who you are even before they meet you. So I would recommend taking a look at that and seeing where you might be able to add some content in there that would really pop and stand out.
I do encourage my clients do a 1-minute introductory video, because here's the thing: this is what job seekers are not doing. Job seekers are not putting themselves out there in a way that's attracting positive, attraction to their profiles. And so You're going to, if you're going to be interviewed, you've got to be able to have that little tell me about yourself question down, which is really just it's probably a little bit more than 1 minute, but a 1 minute introductory video of who you are is something that will set your profile apart, because when you go to the featured section, it pops and it's different, and we respond different to visually we respond different when we see something that's not just a written word. And so again, if you've written an article, it doesn't even have to be an article on LinkedIn. It can be, if you have any type of link, you can add any type of link to that. If you have a portfolio, and anything that you've created that you can put out there, think of 3 things, because the first 3 things are what shows up. Think of 3 things that you can showcase yourself, that you're, because I guarantee you this, I will absolutely guarantee you this, because I look at enough profiles on any given day, that your competition is not doing this. Your competition is not showing up in this manner. And that is something that is going to set yourself apart. And it can be done completely on your profile. And it's not something that requires massive, with a good phone, that's all we really need. So absolutely take advantage of it, and, be able to showcase yourself in that regard. So, a couple of other things I was going to say, maybe we can lean into this a little bit. The other thing that I don't see people doing, Charlie, you mentioned about setting and forgetting about it, and I wanted to add something really quickly. I get a lot of people that will say to me, like, well, yeah, I redid my profile, and but then after a while, nothing happened. People stopped reaching out or connecting with me. And I always say, to your point, Charlotte, we have to feed our profiles. So what are you doing on the flip side? How are you engaging? Who are you connecting with? And connections is a really good, in your network. This is where expanding your network helps you grow exponentially. I always tell my clients, it's not about connecting with me. It's about, when you connect with me, you become a second degree connection to all of my connections, which helps you come up in the search. So think about the number of connections you have, but we should always be looking to grow that number regardless of it. Any tips, Charla or Alan, when it comes to finding the right people to connect with, how we should connect, anything along those lines?
Yeah, I would say I agree with Melanie 100% that it's good to grow your network. So any opportunities that you have when you go to networking events, when you meet people, it's always a good idea to connect with people. When you're on something like the LinkedIn Live we're on here and you see people there, it's good to connect with those people too. So that's important. I would say it's also a good idea to target who you want to connect with. And one of the things I like to mention to my clients is it's good when you're in job search to come up with a target list of companies and organizations you're interested in. Start following them on LinkedIn. When you see people that are publishing content that are at those places, comment on those. So that's a way of starting to develop rapport and a relationship with people. So when you send out a LinkedIn connection request, and it's always great to put a personal note on there. I know it's more limiting if you don't have the premium version, but if you can, it's important to explain to the person why you want to connect with them. You could say, I saw your profile, I was very impressed by it. I'm interested in, the organization that you're in. I'm growing my network. I'd like to connect with you. So if you have things in common, it makes it easier, and people are more willing to accept your connection requests. So I think that's important to develop and start to nurture some of those types of relationships. And I'm of the belief, similar to what Melanie was saying, that it's important, to connect with people, because then you get access to their connections too. And that's a way of getting introductions to people that you have in common with somebody else. So if somebody does an introduction for you, that also increases your chances that the person you're trying to connect with will be willing to connect with you, and potentially will be willing to have a conversation with you as well too. So I think growing your network, it's good to be targeted with it, but it's also good because you never know who might know somebody else that might be helpful to you. So you don't have to just target people that do what you do or in the same industry that you're in. They may be married to somebody, have a neighbor of somebody that is doing something that would be helpful for you. So you never know who might connect you to who that might be helpful.
I absolutely agree. I always said that my dad, he retired early, and he was very fortunate. He got to play golf quite a lot, and but you know what? He knew everybody. So anytime, like when we needed to go buy a new car, or we needed, whatever it was, he knew everybody. And my dad would not have been somebody that you needed an introduction to somebody at a company. Um, he would get so many requests from people because he always had that connection. And so sometimes it's not about what the person does or where they're from or what they're doing now, but it's a matter of like who they're connected with that they can make that introduction. Charlotte, in terms of
Yeah.
introductions, this seems to be an area that we know people struggle with. People get frustrated. People don't respond. Um, Trying to get connected with recruiters or hiring managers sometimes can seem, like a tireless effort. But um, how do you go about recommending to people how to, any best tips or suggestions in crafting that network or,
Sure.
you know,
I
from
want to say something that tags on to you before I lose my train of thought, and then
go
I'll
right
answer that one.
ahead.
How about that? I call it the secret admirer syndrome. You're interested in working for a company, but you're kind of lurking like a social media stalker instead of making those strategic moves to get noticed. And one of the best ways is to comment on other people's posts and not just, gee, I like that, or, great insights, but tell them why. I always remember people who, comment on my posts. I may not always look at who liked my post. I know I should be better about doing that, but I'm not. So put yourself out there. I promise nobody's going to, step on your toes too much unless you're writing something kind of controversial, and try to avoid doing that as well. Politics, try to stay away from that and try, if you're a job seeker, not to complain too much about how hard the job search is right now. I know it's brutal. It's a tough job market out there. You've got to do what it takes to stand out. One of the best ways to be one of the first people interviewed is to have someone refer you into that company. So you want to, connect with those people and start conversations with them. My son, who was in college, was bold enough to contact the CEO of a company. And because he went directly to the top and it was a small to medium sized business, the guy called him in for an interview, said, sure, I'd be happy to talk with you, and ended up offering him a job on the spot. So you never know. Don't think that, you're not going to get any response. However, if that person hasn't posted in a while and you can see that they haven't updated, there's no activity underneath the posts, or, they just aren't active on the program, then use something else. Go to email. There are wonderful tools that can help you, like hunter.io or Voila Norbert. I think it's .com. Both of those can verify email addresses. If you know the name of the person and where they work, they will, give you the email, that's in the company directory most of the time. Sometimes it guesses and, it might bounce back. But I've had really, really good luck using that. The other thing I would do is search on posts rather than on people. So if you're interested in, working for a certain company, just search on posts and then do a Boolean search. So type and in all caps and then put the company name, and you'll see different people that are posting. I would also say that going off LinkedIn to Facebook or X, where they have company life pages, sometimes you can get into a group of software developers that work at Hewlett Packard and, you know, start a conversation off of LinkedIn where people tend to be a little bit more friendly. But LinkedIn, although it's the premier place, there are conversations that are going on. I think Facebook was pretty, you know, close second into,
Yeah.
so don't think you got to put your eggs all in one basket. I would say put the majority of your effort into LinkedIn, but also kind of experiment with some of those other platforms.
There's also a lot of communities coming up. You can Google Slack communities, and this is something I've been trying to learn a little bit more about it for myself in terms of ways for me to connect with others outside of the LinkedIn platform. I know, shocker, I said that, but I absolutely support that. And it's something I've been looking into, but Slack communities, kind of similar, even like what, and I know we're going to transition into, and this will be kind of like WhatsApp communities. There's actually whole communities based on subject matter experts and things of that nature that are, driven through WhatsApp. They're driven through Slack. Meetups are also a great opportunity. You can just and even like looking at, I know this will sound a little random, but go to Eventbrite, look at what's happening in your area. You'd be surprised that there's a lot of networking, but also, conversations, and they may be small events and things of that nature. But truthfully, I prefer to like have a smaller event, maybe where I get a chance to know one or two people and really be able to connect and have a conversation with them, as opposed to like, 100-person event or something like that. And so look for those types of events that are happening, and look for ways to get connected with the event coordinators. Things, there's so many ways that sometimes, again, we do the same thing over and over, and then we say, oh, this isn't working. But sometimes we need to take a step back, and we need to say, okay, if this isn't working for me and I'm not getting the responses, how can I change up what I'm saying or what I'm doing? Or who can I change that up to? Who can I reach out to? Who can, I landed one of my jobs, my last job before I became a coach. I saw the posting on LinkedIn and reached out to the job poster, who I knew wasn't the hiring manager, just based on the title. And also based on the job description, it said this position would be reporting to the CFO. So I reached out to her, and then I reached out to the CFO because honestly, I had nothing to lose at that point. I really absolutely 100% needed that job more than anything else at that point in my life. But I reached out to the CFO. I reached out to the job poster, who, again, she was in accounting. She had no real decision making in terms of, but she was going to schedule the interview. So I did the polite thing, reached out to her, and I did have an interview within 24 hours because truthfully, I was making their job easier. Um, that's one of the things that I always do, remind people too, is that, if you're a good solid candidate and you really do truly match those job descriptions, don't be afraid to reach out. But to Charlotte's point, we want to be polite, we do want to be courteous, and even if we are struggling with the job search, we don't know what that other person is struggling with either. So it's always good to have that empathy going both ways. So definitely encouraging on that note. So we've got about 15 more minutes. I think that's a good transition for us to kind of talk a little bit about, because we did have this conversation in our group chat. And if you do want to be a part of that, just you can tag Merrill Cass. He's in the chat and dropping comments here for us. Thank you, Merrill. And Merrill also knows that I don't multitask very well. And so if I could just focus, then we're all good. He will definitely be happy to add you to our chat, and that way we stay on top of events that are happening that you might be interested in. So, all that being said, we know scams are happening. Charlotte, I'll start with you. What are you seeing right now? Let's start with what we're seeing right now as far as scams go, and then what is our recommendations and how for people to stay alert and protected.
Yeah, it's brutal out there right now. I have the recruiter, where a recruiter could see that I'm open to part-time career coaching. Sometimes I'll pick up a contract assignment, for a company that's doing, laying off a bunch of people here locally, and they want someone locally to work with them. So I keep that on, but that alone has led to a ton of scams. Mostly the red flags are that, they've seen your profile and they have this job that's just perfect for you. And then they throw out a few legitimate company names. Um, One of them was JP Morgan Chase, but and another one was Deloitte. I mean, they're going to throw out some big name companies so that you are fooled into thinking that it's a legitimate opportunity. And then they'll ask to move the conversation to text or to WhatsApp. Anytime they ask you to pay for a background check or any processing fees before you start, run the other direction. Don't give them your social security number, bank details, or any of your personal identification. Make sure that it's a legitimate interview, with a legitimate company. Anytime they don't want to talk to you in a Zoom meeting, you can pretty much bet that it's a scam. And some of them are very convincing. And then they've also started cloning. I've had a couple of friends that had their profiles cloned. And so you think, oh, well, Sarah Johnson's hiring for a digital marketing. That would be a neat job. I'll refer my little niece to that. And, Sarah had to write a post that, she didn't have any job openings, that somebody had cloned her. So that makes it really, really tough to know when it's legit and when it's not. So those are the things that I've been seeing. If it sounds too good to be true, and then they don't want to have a Zoom interview, and they won't, invite you in for an in-person interview, those are all things that you might make you skeptical. Oh, and Melanie, tell them about what happened to Christy Klein.
Oh yeah, so I've got to. I'll probably have to go back and look at the messaging. But we had another fellow career coach, and Charlotte, help me fill in the details because I feel like my brain.
Yeah, the bottom line, I think, was that one of her clients.
It wasn't one of her. Yeah, it was definitely.
It was a friend. Yeah, a recruiter friend of hers. It wasn't one of her clients, but they ended up stealing $65,000 out of that person's bank account. So that's why I said, don't give them any information like that. And but all it took was for her to click on the link to look at the job. Then by clicking on that link, they had somehow rerouted and stole her personal information. So I would say in this day and age, you want to freeze your bank accounts to where, any, transfer over a certain amount, you're alerted to. Freeze your credit report so that nobody can open a credit card in your name. There's just steps that you need to do to protect yourself. So this person was unemployed, I think, and they stole her whole savings.
Yeah, and that's really what we're seeing now is so much that they're trying to get you, and because honestly, there's like scams happening, and I know Charlotte and I have both seen this for people that are inquiring about career coaching services, for example, and they're actually scammers. And what they're trying, and you go check out their profile, and you're like, oh, that's not a person I'd work with or whatever. That's not in my wheelhouse or whatever. But
yeah, also look to see how many followers they had. The person that scammed me was a legitimate person, but when I looked at the profile, she had 0 followers, but yet she'd been on LinkedIn for 20 years and was, something doesn't add up, and you get that gut feeling that this is too good to be true, or something's not right here. Go to the company's website, find the right person on the company directory, ask them if they truly do have that job that's open.
Yeah, definitely go and look at the company website. Go look at even just like honestly Googling that job description and that company, just do a Google search and see if it comes up in other places. That is another thing. And also know too that this is not just exclusive to LinkedIn. This is happening on all the platforms. So this is happening on Indeed, in particular Indeed, but it's also like people are getting messaging. So we obviously are here on LinkedIn, so it maybe feels like it's exploited here. Gregory mentioned report the LinkedIn user who's doing the scamming. Actually, what I would recommend you guys doing, and this is what you will see, for example, they're targeting, and what's happening is they're spamming. Like you'll comment on something, and there's probably a word or a phrase that's triggering these massive spam comments. And LinkedIn is actually doing a good, I will say, doing as much as they can to keep up with us, because you'll see this person that'll say, "Hey, I see you're looking for a job." It's the exact same response under like, 3 or 4 different people that have commented on a certain post. It could be a hashtag that's, triggering that response. But LinkedIn is limiting the number of comments a user, not to the point where like we wouldn't be able to function, but like you can't do you can't do massive commenting. But when you see something like that, don't just report that this is a scam. Go and report the profile. And in those cases, report the profile as a fake profile, because LinkedIn is more likely to respond, because that's really where the scanning piece is a little bit more, it becomes harder for them to detect, but they can detect immediately if that is a fake profile or not. They have the ability to do that. That's also why people do get kicked off for using certain tools and things of that nature. So don't use the scanning option, use the fake profile. And truthfully, if they're a real person and they're not doing anything illegal, they'll get their profile back. It might take a little while, but I'd rather be on the safe side. And truthfully, most of these people commenting on these posts are not, they're fake profiles. They're being duplicated at rates that nobody would be able to keep up with. So everything that Charlotte said, anything you want to add real quick, Alan, and then we'll do a quick roundup before we leave tonight.
Yeah, I would kind of echo the comments that if it looks too good to be true, if it's something, a lot of times these scams are related to remote jobs. If it looks too good to be true, that you don't have to work many hours, you don't have to do a whole lot, and there's a lot of money involved, and that's a red flag. I'm also skeptical personally from people that are sending me messages to connect that are in foreign countries. So I'm a little more hesitant to do that if I don't feel like there's anything that we have in common, that I don't accept those people. If we have a bunch of common connections and it's somebody that there might be some value to that, then I'll consider doing that. So I think you have to be a little bit skeptical when people are coming to you or they're promising you, if you have your own business, that they're going to get you so many leads and stuff. I get those types of messages all the time. So that's, I don't see that there's any value to me of doing that. What do they know if they're in Vietnam about, my clients or how to recruit here? So I think you have to be skeptical about things too. And, when there's misspellings and things like that and emails and stuff like that, those are red flags as well too.
And we had a couple of other people add open. Linda Brubaker commented, hashtag open to work does seem to trigger spam messages. I absolutely agree. Actually, probably that's a great test, Linda. We'll probably see overnight. We will see people messaging individuals. If I do see them in any of my posts or any comments that I'm making, I actually report the profile. And Doris, I see that you mentioned always delete those. Before you delete them, report the profile as a fake profile. So that is the big thing that I have learned is the big thing to help counteract, is if we report them as fake profiles, there's going to be LinkedIn's able to actually do more with that than just being able, spam's a murky water, to be very honest, but a fake profile is something that they actually don't tolerate. And again, it's a beast that they're trying to combat. But I will say, I do give them props because I know these are happening on Indeed. It's happening with Glassdoor. There's so many things that are happening. I'm on Reddit and read things that are happening from Reddit. And so just be, Kumar mentioned due diligence. You have to do your due diligence. If you see that you have common connections, look at those common connections. Hey, do you know such and such, things like that. And if it doesn't feel right to you, then go ahead and move on. It's okay. That's the big thing too, is that it's okay to do that. So I pushed it to the last minute. So, but Charla, I'd like that. I'll start with you. Have you give any last tips? We had a great conversation today. A lot of people joined in and were listening in with us. But any last tips and how people can connect with you, or anything that you'd like to share with what you're doing right now?
Sure. I'd like to tag on one more thing on the scams. If it is something where you end up losing money, you can report it to the FTC or the FCC. I don't remember which one. As and then the government, they'll be listed, on a government list, and maybe more likely. I mean, honestly, it's hard to catch these people. Most of them are bad actors from foreign countries, and that's usually a tip off, like Alan said, when there's misspellings in it. So you have to protect yourself, from all of these, and it's frustrating. And the other thing that I'm seeing is in the LinkedIn services proposals, it used to only send like 5 proposals out to each person, but now it's sending like 24 and 30 proposals out. And I've had people, write me nasty messages, stop sending me things, and I had to explain to them that we don't work for LinkedIn. We're all independent businesses, So, I'm about ready to give up on that. And that has in the past been a good source of leads. So I would caution, if you have other friends that are thinking about using that service, to kind of go through the network and find out reputable people like Alan and Melanie and Ken and myself that, could, help you, somebody that has been in business for a long time. I mean, because one lady said, when I look for a plumber, I might get 3 estimates, right? But, 24, 27, 30.
Well, there are so many career coaches.
Yeah. So, that's just a thing that I battled this week, which was a different frustrating thing about LinkedIn. So don't think just as a job seeker, you're the only ones that are frustrated with LinkedIn. Believe you me, we are frustrated too. We talked a lot tonight about making your profile a living document that evolves with your career, kind of like a good friendship evolves over time. Set monthly reminder dates to update your achievements and add new skills and refresh your content. Set weekly time, block it out on your calendar to invest in relationship building. Get in touch with those people you haven't talked with in 10 years, people that you used to go to college with. That's kind of a fun thing to do, and you never know, they might know of opportunities. It's not enough just to search within your own local area, because oftentimes somebody who lives in Florida might know of a job in Pennsylvania, and vice versa. So, it's a much more a wider net that you have to cast, but don't forget the depth of the relationships that you need to build.
Absolutely. Before we go to you, Alan, I will say I had a person that I helped coach who was from India, and we actually did a search. I mean, she lived in Maine. It was like a small town in Maine, and she's like, "How am I ever going to find a job here?" But surprisingly enough, we actually did a search, and we started with her college, and we actually found her a whole community of people that also came from India that happened to be within distance, but even within a distance she could network with. And she honestly was like, it felt like she had a little bit of home, and she had connections that understood her backstory and her history, but they also allowed her to make introductions to people. So this platform has power when we're using it right. So, Alan, how can people connect with you, and last thoughts?
Yeah, you can connect with me by LinkedIn. If we've seen you on the platform, I'm always glad to connect, and if I can help you, I will. And I would say, again, be an active participant with LinkedIn. It's not a spectator sport. So we didn't talk a lot about how to use LinkedIn. We were talking more about the profile and how to optimize that too. But it's important to stay active, and you can take small steps. You don't have to start publishing your own content right away, but you can, when you see people changing jobs, when you see they have service anniversaries or birthdays, it's good. That's a good way to refresh and, connect with your network again too. And it's important to stay connected with your network, not just when you need them for something job search related, but just to have that connection there. So when something does come up, you're not coming out of the blue from, 10 years ago. That was the last time you had any kind of contact with the person. They're a lot less likely to be willing to be receptive and help you. So I'd say, stay active on LinkedIn, have that healthy skepticism, like we were talking about at the end of the conversation with, people trying to sell you things or having a great offer for you. But it's definitely important as a job seeker to be active on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And of course, you guys can connect with me. I do want to mention I've got two things happening this Thursday. My LinkedIn Rockstar Academy with Shell Shapiro. We do have a live master class. Very affordable, $77 for the session. It's an hour and a half, and we're going to be going through LinkedIn profiles. So now is a great time to. We still got room and we still have spots. So if you're interested, please let me know. The other thing that I decided to do on the fly, because I had a couple of people ask for it is I'm going to be teaching a webinar on the 21st. It's going to be at 1 o'clock till 2:30. The 21st is a Monday, and there is a fee for this one, but if you walk away, I'm going to do the 3 layers of networking. So how do we find the right people to connect with? What do we say? And how can we engage and to gain traction on this platform without it being cringy? So if you're interested in finding out more about that, please let me know as well. You can message me or just drop a comment in the chat, and I can look for it. And yeah, so it was a great conversation, and we're back. Still being adjusted to our calendar. So we're back on the last Tuesday of the month, which will be on the
22nd.
The 22nd. Yeah, I was like, that's not right. So we'll be back on the 22nd. Thanks, Alan. And I was like, what day are we back? And so we will be back on the 22nd. There's an extra week in July, and that's confusing a bunch of stuff. But we will be back on the 22nd. And yeah, and we hope that you will tune in. And if you like what you heard, let us know. And if there are other topics you want us to tackle, please let us know as well. Thank you so much, and hope you all have a great night.